Okay, it is week 5, and week 5. Well, I told you that the quarter would go very, 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 very fast. We started August 8th. It is September 4th today. We have one more week to go. As a matter of fact, as of this Friday, which is the 7th, uh, you will know that we have 1 week exactly left in the quarter. And so you will discover that this next week or so will be very busy, especially for me because I got to uh, deal with grades for, for the second part of the course. You have received your grades from weeks 1, 2, and 3 already. You just submitted your week 4 on Sunday, and so I'll be starting to work on those later in the week. And then next week I will be trying to keep up with 5 and then get 6, which will be due for that Friday. Then I'll have until that following Monday, which is the 17th, to have all of your grades in. So it'll be a very busy time with me teaching 5 classes, about 135 students. So it'll be like crunch time for me. So I hope that you have learned a lot in this class. I've tried to share my experiences. I've tried to share with you some explanation, giving you some examples, and explain to you the importance of some of the practicing material that's in each week's module. I will go ahead and start to share. Uh, Okay, let's see. I did it there. Let's click on that. There we go. Oh, it took off again. There we go. Now you should see it. Okay, so now you can see the course homepage, which you're familiar with. Now, let me say this to you, and I said this last week, and I'm going to say it again, that too many of you are still losing points on a number of things. For example, many of you are finding yourselves in situations where you are missing the proper length of the assignment. Make sure that you read the module and pay close attention to the rubric. It tells you the length of each assignment. And you should note that most of the assignments are part 1, part 2, and each has a different page requirement. You should also know that many of you have lost points because of the fact that you didn't satisfy APA. The statement is up here at the beginning of class that APA is very important, and I specifically talked about research, the importance of research, and then next, APA, citations in the body, and references at the end, and a cover sheet for all written assignments, and it should be in Romans 12. I haven't been really dogmatic about that, but some of you have lost points, and I've pointed it out to you. I know sometimes students don't read my my comments about why they lost points, and if you click on your rubric in your grade book, you will see a section that has comments or remarks or and it explains why you lost points. I don't just take the points away. I tell you why. If it's a late assignment, I let you know that as well. But the key thing is that you need to be aware of is how to satisfy APA. It is in your rubric. The last section in all of the written assignments address a number of details, but the most important stuff in there deal with APA. It is so very important, and I am very dogmatic. Some students have said to me that I'm one of the only professors that they've had that stress it. Well, I'm sorry to hear that because that's a school rule. It's in our um, syllabus. It's part of what we as instructors are supposed to make sure that our students know, because we're doing a disservice to our students if we don't, because it goes with the integrity issues, giving credit for sources. It also provides you with the practice of supporting your statements, demonstrating that you conducted some research as well, giving the reader an opportunity, if they wanted to go and learn more about what you wrote, they can go to the source itself and get the information, just like you should have gotten the information from the source as well. So this is how academia works, and it actually is how it works when you're in the real world. As a lawyer, I had to cite cases all the time in documents, memos, briefs that I submitted to the court. I had to provide the name of the case. I had to provide the court citation, which includes the page, the publication it came from, the volume, the publication it came from, and the page where it started on, and then the year, in parentheses, that case was issued. All those types of things that professionals still have to do. So we're getting you into the habit so that when you do enter the field of working, you are already up to speed, and it's very, very, very important. So our rubrics make sure that we let you know that constantly. Don't just rush through the assignment. Make sure that you have done that. And then Grammarly. Not many of you have had this issue. You're apparently running your papers through Grammarly, and you're able to provide enough critical thinking in your papers so that you don't get with a high Grammarly hit, because that will cause you to lose points too as well. So those are just some of the things that I want you to be cognizant of and pay attention as we consider these next 2 weeks assignments, week 5 and week 6. As you can see, we're in week 5 lecture. I will be uploading an archive of this, providing you with a keyword. And the next lecture will be a week from today, September the 11th, at the same time. And that will be the final lecture. Okay, let's take a look at what our announcement for the week is. Crimes Against Moral Values, Chapter 7 of the textbook. I sent you the PowerPoints previously on. Look at the activities: drug laws, drunk and drugged driving, distracted driving, hate crimes, key terms for practice, and I won't go over those again today. I will leave those to you because by now you know how that works. And then you also want to, for practice, drunk driving and forced blood draws, identify the drug schedule, and then the quiz. It's a practice quiz. Remember, you have another quiz coming up week 6, I believe. Yeah, week 6 is it. You had one in week 3 as well. Then your discussion post, which is due tonight, your initial post, drunk driving, is due by 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time tonight, and your reply post Saturday at the same time. Finally, your written assignment for this week is, has a hate crime been committed, and you're going to satisfy all the requirements that we're going to go over in just a few minutes. In the meantime, just to refresh you again, we're going to take a quick look at the course calendar, and you'll see, again, there's students sometimes that even come back and say to me, I don't know when assignments are due. I says, well, it's all over the place. It's in the assignment um, itself. It is also in the announcement and is on the calendar. So here we are. Your reading assignment, as I just talked about, there it is right there for this week, okay? And then your initial post, then your lecture, your reply post, and then your written assignment, which tells you to look at the module and rubric. I keep saying it is so critical. And then it tells you the due date as well, okay? And that's it. That is it. So now let's take a look at the module itself. Here we go. Again, very quickly, looking at the assignments, the discussion posts based on drunk driving, your written assignment. Is a part one from the police officer's perspective. You're going to be looking at the scenario here, and you're going to be dealing with this. And then part two, defense attorney's perspective. Part three. Notice that each of these have a minimum of 1 page. So your total assignment should be 3 pages. Now, be aware, the best way to do this, because some of you have not done this, is start your paper off with part one, the police officer perspective, and then write your paper. Have your citations, have your references, have everything that you need. You should surely just have to have one cover sheet. You don't have to have a cover sheet for each part. And then start part two, the defense perspective, dealing with whether or not there's hate crime involved, and then the detective's perspective. So what you're really doing is writing a paper that helps you. Now, again, if you need help, I already told you about this guides, and I'll just click on it, and then you'll see what it looks like. There it is. And it tells you, you know, about what to do, and it tells you about how to write discussion posts, which you already know, but it also tells you about your weekly written assignment, and you can click on these tabs. Explains Grammarly to you, APA, and all of this. And then, more importantly, in here, it gives you an ability to be able to locate information that you need to help you with your papers. So you want to make sure that you there's how to find statutes and cases. There's an online library here that helps you with your research as well. So you have those things right there, all right? So this helps you to complete this. And it tells you also, you can take a look at all of these tabs under here that will help you, all right? So there's no reason why you don't succeed. Then let's go back to looking at clicking on the assignment, which is the first thing you have to do, and it tells you the due date, and it tells you the time, it tells you how many points, it tells you the rubric. So you can take time, look at the rubric. Notice 10%, 10 points for completing the first part correctly, the second part 10 points, the third. So let's say, for example, you just do 2 of the assignments, you'll get 20 points, and you'll lose 10 points right off the bat. And then we get down here, and we see 5 points for the appropriate length. Now, in paragraphs, don't write one long paragraph. Your paragraph should be an average of 5 to 6 sentences. It should have a topic sentence in it, and it should provide details and information. Make sure you satisfy these requirements. And then finally, in the last part, notice APA. Breaking it down again, with the title page, a reference page, proper spacing and paragraphs, I already said that, and then in-text citation in the body of the paper. Very important in that you use credible resources and not things like Wikipedia and things of that nature. So that's it. That's how you do it. And it's right there. You have it all the time in each of your assignments to help you to do well. Don't just rush through there and look at it and start writing. Pay attention to make sure that you satisfy all the requirements of the rubrics. So now let's complete today by going over the lesson content section. Crimes against moral values. You had here your reading. We're going to talk a little bit about drug laws, drunk and drugged driving, distracted driving, hate crimes, and then I won't deal with the key terms and that stuff down there. We're going to conclude there because you have your assignments here. So let's go right down and let's talk about drug laws. I teach a course on drugs and crime. I just finished the lecture, and in fact, one of your classmates who was in this course last quarter happened to be in it. I don't know if she got her times mixed up, but dealing with that. But drugs are a real serious problem, and that the law attempts to control substance abuse relating to drugs because, as I've said before, and I'll say it again, there is a correlation between drug use and crime. They go hand in hand. Drug use leads to more crime because those individuals who use drugs or become addicted to drugs commit crimes to support their habits. And those crimes are prostitution, robbery, theft, and all kinds of things. So the law enforcement people have been operating on arresting people with this issue, but there is a new paradigm that's coming out, and I shared this with my drugs and crime course. Illinois is leading the way with what we call Senate Bill 3023. You can take a look at Senate Bill 3023. Let's see if I still have the information here. I think I do. I do have it right here. And Illinois Senate Bill 3023 is an attempt to give police and communities the ability to work together to combat crisis. What it does is this, and this is very simply, it authorizes, I'm reading it straight from here, it authorizes and encourages local law enforcement leaders to create collaborative local programs that deflect individuals who have overdosed. Instead of arresting them, putting them in the criminal justice system, it deflects them and head them towards places where they can get help. Who have overdosed, who have substance abuse problems, from the criminal justice system and into addiction treatment services, and that's the big key. So if you get a chance to look at that, and so the police are on the front line. The law enforcement is on the front line of dealing with these deflection programs, and in general, there are two choices that individuals face when they have a substance abuse disorder: arrest or not arrest. That's the law enforcement side. Well, deflection programs provide a third option, and that is to connect people with substance abuse use services that address their substance use problems. That's the way I've advocated and will continue to say how we have to deal with it. And so it is very, very, very important that you understand that the laws are not really intended to be punitive, but to be protective of individuals, their health, because there is a serious health crisis with overdose, and they have now drugs, Noxalone, and there's some others that are particularly on point that used to help individuals who have those problems. For example, I just got a message today about a seminar called, let's see, what is it entitled? It is Darkness to Light, and it's going to take place this Sunday. I won't be able to go because it happens at the same time as my church. But and someone sent it to me, whoops, and they will be dealing with Narcan overdose prevention training, drug prevention and awareness training, and then several other things. But it's titled From Darkness to Light, a Substance Abuse Workshop. The key thing is that what is taking place is to educate people about what is going on. It's not about you lock up somebody for substance abuse, they come out even worse, and they go right back to it. There was a powerful movie that we shared in our J150 course, and those of you who have taken it know what I'm talking about, called Chasing the Dragon. It's about an hour-long video, and it goes over in detail some of the effects. And then I've had a chance to have this individual here with this book I'm holding up. It's called From Dope to Hope, A Man in Recovery, Tim Ryan, who is a counselor now, and he wrote this book explaining what he went through, and he also reveals that his son overdosed and he wasn't able to help him, and talk about the effects that this has. But looking at what we have here today, this particular issue, we're talking about the history of what law enforcement has done in the past dealing with the various laws. As you should know, that there is what we call the Uniform Controlled Substance Act of 1970, which classifies drugs by their abuse, and so from Schedule 1, the most serious ones, all the way down to Schedule 5, and you can take a look at, and you will see some definitions that are high potential for abuse, for example, and no medical use, lack of demonstrated safety under supervision, heroin, LSD, ecstasy, and even marijuana there. Now, marijuana is on the brink of moving from that because, as you and I both know, that the jurisdictions across the country are legalizing marijuana as we speak. Almost every place. Colorado has it. I think California has it. I think Massachusetts has it, just to mention a few states. But even in states that are not, like Illinois even, there is a movement towards taking these drugs and marijuana, that is, and allowing it to become legal. Now, it'll be probably monitored the same way as driving under the influence of alcohol and things like that. But anyway, these other three will probably, and then there is a medical use for marijuana already, you know, for glaucoma and other, that's a long time. But anyway, so these are examples of Schedule 1. Then Schedule 2, oxycodone, fentanyl, opium, and cocaine, and talks about the abuse for those. And then you get to 3, Then you get to see things like Tylenol with codeine that you have to have a prescription for, Suboxone, Ketane, anabolic steroids, those kind of things. There is a lower potential for abuse, but they lead to psychological and physical damages to the body as well. Then you go down to Schedule 4, where you got Valium and things of that nature. But there are also some psychological issues and dependence involved there. You will find our dependencies involved in all these different levels. And then finally at Schedule 5, cough suppressants, codeine. A lot of these things are combined, by the way, with heroin to create, and also some marijuana to create dangerous drugs that people ingest and put in their body. And then they talked about the coming in the 80s of the cheap drug called crack cocaine, which is a manufactured drug, which is primarily cocaine, but there are all kinds of chemicals that are involved with that. And so then the war on drugs really escalated because of the fact that when this came about, this is what we call a cheap high. You could get with a few dollars, you could get high on crack. But what happens is crack begins to take you and elevate you to using more and more and more, and it creates a situation where you become controlled by the drug and you become addicted to it. So what the Uniform Substance Act does is it sets out the criminal laws for possession, sale, delivery, and manufacture. Now, the laws have attempted to deal with the quantities to cut off the drug dealers, you know, your cartels, like you have El Chapo, Guzman, you have all kinds of cartels all across the world, from Mexico and from other parts of the world. But one of the things that I have always said and continue to say is that if we are able to take away the customers, that is, those individuals who use it, then it's going to be a real problem for them. It's like any other business. If you don't have customers, you go out of business. And that's what we're trying to do with helping individuals from the health side. So the war on drugs continues, but at the same time, we need to begin to recognize programs like 3023 that I was talking about a few minutes ago as well. So dealing with possession, from the criminal law perspective is when someone actually has it on their body, and then constructive occurs when a person has the right ability to control the item, but it's not in their person. For example, a marijuana pipe on an automobile, and a person who's operating it. It's just like the open liquor that's found in. It's the person who's operating the vehicle who generally is going to be in trouble. And oftentimes, that person will find themselves catching a case, as we say. And then there are various statutes, such as the Ohio statute here, which says a person is guilty of possessing a controlled substance if they knowingly possess it, and that they have control of that substance analog. A controlled substance analog is a substance that is similar to a chemical structure in one or two, and then there are other designer type drugs, you know, like they talk about K2 spice. LSD was kind of in that, and there are so many others, and these are out there as well. So the key thing is to try to deal with the big quantities The person who is in possession with a personal amount, generally those people are junkies or either victims who are hooked on it, and they'll get busted with that. But if you have a certain quantity that is above what they consider to be personal use, you discover the fact that you're labeled in as a drug dealer, and your offenses are very, 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 very large. Your sentences are very long, as should be, because what the idea of that is to discourage people from selling drugs. And again, like I said again, it's a two-way battle, getting those individuals who not want drugs, and then also at the same time trying to cut into the supply of drugs that come from the dealers and the cartels and organizations themselves. So it is illegal to deal with these drugs, and you can look all the way down. I'm not going to go in detail, but you can see that there is illicit drug trade all over, and you'll find a lot of the border states, or those are near water, like Florida, Texas, New Mexico, California, that border on states. You don't hear as much about drugs coming from Canada as you do from the South. How come that is? Well, the answer is very clear. It's colder up there, and the drugs actually thrive in warmer climates, and they actually arrive in this country. And you'll be surprised. I talked about this before, that there are individuals called mules. These are individuals who will carry drugs on their person. For example, they'll put a belt around them, and they'll allow them to go through detectors. But now it's getting to the point that drug sniffing dogs at the airports are able to discover those. Another dangerous way is, and this is particularly with marijuana and mostly with cocaine, I should say, and heroin, is, and this heroin especially comes in terms from Mexico. They have this brown heroin, but anyway, here's what happens. The heroin is put inside balloons, and the balloons are like, the individuals take them and they swallow them, and they come across the border with that, and oftentimes people will OD because the balloon will rupture in their bodies. But if by chance that the balloon doesn't, what they will do is when they get into the United States, they will be given a laxative, and yep, it comes out that way. That's pretty messed up. But those are just some of the things. They use vehicles that have phony bottoms, phony gas tanks, phony places where tires are kept. They'll also put it inside tires themselves. It's all kinds of things. So anyway, the bottom line is that they come into the country, and so the law enforcement agencies have their hands full in dealing with this. So the bottom line statement is that controlled substances not only put the individual user at a risk of addiction and self-harm, but put everybody at risk of harm when that individual gets behind the wheel of a car because they're high and or commits a crime themselves. And so that's pretty much that. Now let's talk about drunk driving and drug driving. Under the influence of drugs or either alcohol is illegal for obvious reasons. It creates a dangerous weapon in the hands of an individual, being an automobile, and you can lose control. There are many instances where people are killed, not necessarily the drivers, but passengers, pedestrians, and other vehicles. For example, there have been many times that either drunk drivers or those who are driving under the influence of drugs will cross the median and go head on into a collision and create serious injury or death. Same thing happens when there are people who go down, for example, the ramp on a highway. They'll go down the exit ramp as an entrance ramp. And you know what that means. That's pretty deadly because you got two cars and they're going to collide, and you can get serious bodily injury or death. So according to the U.S. Centers for Disease Control, or the CDC, it says 28 people die each day in motor vehicle crashes based on alcohol-impaired drivers. One person dies every 53 minutes in an alcohol-related crash. Think about it, every 53 minutes. Alcohol-impaired driving accounts for 31% of driving fatalities. A total of 9,967 people died in alcohol-related crashes in 2014, and that number is increasing and not decreasing. And then they talk about the financial impact, but what about the loss of life that takes place? And there are serious laws. When I was practicing law, I started in '78. The blood alcohol content level, or the BAC, was 10, was 0.10, and so many people died. Finally, the federal government changed and lowered the standard to 0.08, which is where it is now, where if you blew on the breathalyzer a 0.08, you would be considered as driving under the influence. It was 0.10. And the reason being is because it was at first the issue of, well, there were fewer people creating accidents that were actually under 10, but when they got to 10, they did. But then the numbers they start noticing the numbers for people under 10 were creating injuries and or deaths. So all the states adopted 0.8 illegal, which means per se, which means on its face. If you blow that on the breathalyzer, you're deemed whether you admit it or not. So that speaks for itself. And so you're impaired and you are not able to control a vehicle, and that even if you are, the point of the matter is that you violated the law on the book. It is a strict liability issue. It's not that I didn't know. So what happens is that we're trying to save lives, and that's what it's all about. Okay? So down here, it's talking about other states also have laws that make it illegal for a person to be under physical control while under the influence. If you are in a vehicle and the vehicle is running, the key is in there, and you're sitting in the driver's position, a vehicle, then you are deemed to be in physical control of a vehicle for purposes of that, even if it's not on. And so the reason being is because that's the point where people control vehicles. Now, being in the driver's position in the front seat or in the driver's position of any kind of vehicle, having possession of the vehicle, ignition key or other ignition device, you can be considered as driving under the influence, or either in physical control, which is one of the elements that's proven. So it says to prove homicide by intoxicated use, it must be shown that the defendant operated the motor vehicle, of course, while under the influence with a BAC of 0.08 or the driver is considered impaired, and then it results in the death of a person. So that's vehicular homicide there. Okay, and then they give some other things here about things that you can observe to know pretty much that a person is driving under influence, weaving, driving through a traffic signal, striking a curb, though that doesn't always indicate that, but there are several other things here which I'm not going to go over, and you can click those on your own time. And then once police officers establish probable cause, the person is arrested, transported to a location such as the police department, and submit to chemical tests where there's blood drawn, as I say, sometimes the breath test, and sometimes even the urine as well. So all states have what they call implied consent laws, which means arrested drivers are given the option to consent. Now, if you don't consent, then you are putting yourself in jeopardy of a more serious penalty. And it's implied that when you drive a vehicle or operate a vehicle, that you're agreeing to give consent when requested for these tests. But if you refuse, then your penalty could be more severe. Now, the issue is that what you do is you take away the ability of the one who must carry the burden forth, and that is the prosecution, to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that you committed or that you're under the influence. So you're taking away evidence. And so there are situations when warrants are issued for situations like that. The case of Missouri versus McNeely is a case that explains that more in detail. Before the McNeely decision, the law could force a blood draw. But now the McNeely case changed that, and now law enforcement officers have to get a warrant before they can draw blood in a situation. But you can be rest assured that you're playing cute in those situations. You're not necessarily going to get away. And that's the alcohol. Applying the same kind of situation to drug driving, you can drive under the influence of a drug. You could do it inadvertently, or like, for example, let's say, for example, you're not a illegal drug user, but you may have taken your medication and forgot you took it and took an extra dose. Then in that case, then you find yourself in a situation where you're driving under the influence of drugs. If any amount of marijuana or cocaine is in the blood of a driver, then they're deemed to be driving under the influence. And so there are experts who can help determine those individuals that are under the influence. I'm not going to show this video. You can take a look at it at your own time to learn about these drug recognition experts and the steps that they take to be able to do that. Okay. And then finally, before we get to hate crimes with driving, dealing with distracted driving. You know what that is. Most jurisdictions now have what we call hands-free driving, which means that you shouldn't be having your texting. And listen to this. Distracted driving is an activity that diverts attention and actually includes, some people don't know this, talking or texting on your phone. Now, people do that all the time. I have in my car the system that allows me to talk hands-free and I can hear it throughout the car, and everybody in the car can hear it too. But eating and drinking can also be, and I'm not talking about alcohol, eating a burger or fries and stuff like that, talking to people in your vehicle. It's hard for them to arrest you for distracted driving for that, but technically that is. The bottom line is this: while you may see that, well, you're not technically creating a problem, but what you are is you're creating a possible serious injury or death to you or someone, a passenger or yourself, a driver. Because remember, you're operating a big vehicle, a car, truck, SUV, whatever. And the point of the matter is that you need to be focused 100% on what you're doing. It doesn't take but a second, bam. And you already know the situation with texting and driving. There have been not just injuries, but deaths that came about. Now, look at this one, at what we did here in Illinois. It says that as distracted driving became more prominent, laws were created across the nation that prohibit other acts such as texting, driving, or even emailing while driving. In Illinois, under a statute, it talks about electronic communication device includes but not limited to a handheld wireless telephone, handheld digital assistant, or portable or mobile computer, but does not include a global GPS system. Now, that I still have some issues with. I mean, why did they exclude that? Because, again, the point of the matter is that your global thing can result in the same thing. So, but it says it does not include a global system or GPS or device that is physically or electronically integrated into the motor vehicle. And the reason for that is because it's there. But I can tell you this, that I see a lot of cars, and you've seen this, where the little screen is right up there on the dashboard. And a glance at that, just 1 second, can result in a crash. So I suspect that in the future, that's probably going to be changing. But the truth of the matter is that distracted driving, along with driving under the influence of alcohol or drugs, is a very serious problem in our country, and does result in serious injury and or death to too many people. And these crimes can be decreased by good choices made by people. All right. The final thing that I'm going to talk about is hate crime. Just very reducing it to the least common denominator, or the real deal on if a person commits a crime and it's based on the sexual orientation, gender, disability, sex, gender, race, then many states, including Illinois, have hate crimes. And what that does is it elevates the crime that would consider to be not as serious to a higher level, and protects the class of people, and gives individuals who commit these crimes under these circumstances, such as things like battery, robbery, vandalism, arson, more extensive jail time, or a longer time away from the public, put it that way. So the problem is that you have to first establish that the reason why the person committed the offense was based upon an attack upon those individuals because of their class. And that's the toughest part. Sometimes it's very easy, okay? But as you can see, looking at Wisconsin statute, for example, it says prohibits intentionally committing a crime against another or selecting an individual or their property because of that person's belief or perception regarding race, religion, color, disability, sexual orientation, national origin, or ancestry, whether or not the person's belief or perception was correct. And what that is an attempt to broaden the ability of law enforcement to label acts as hate crime. And it's happening all over the country. And again, it is not an easy task, but it is there to protect people so that you're not committing crimes, but for the fact that that person is in one of those classes that are protected. And so it's very, very, very important. The case of Wisconsin versus Mitchell, a 1993 case, deals with that issue, and you take time to look at that, and you'll see some examples of how racism can be included in an offense that is normally not as serious. But here's what it is: we're at the point where what we want to try to do is create more serious classification of crimes when it is based on what we call hate and what has been described as hate. Okay? And that's all I'm going to say about that. The key thing that you want to do here is look at these key terms, the practice for drunk driving, and the practice. Take time to do them, quizzes. I've explained how those things work, and you want to make sure that you do those things. Okay? So one of the things that I want to do is leave you with a key word or phrase. Any questions about the assignment or anything this week? Let's see, let me open it back up. Any questions?
No questions.
No questions. Okay, very good. And I hope those of you who look at the archive will understand what we're talking about here, the seriousness of these things. So I'm going to give you distracted driving. That's it. That's what I'm going to be looking for, distracted driving. Give me that for your points. So with that, I'm going to say good night. Hope to see you next week for our final lecture. And again, you know the rule about reaching out to me. If it turns out that you need some help, you know the rule, and that I'm very, 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 very serious about helping. But how many of you know that I can't help you if I don't know that you're having a problem? Usually when I find out that you have a problem is when you submitted the assignment. I had students that say, oh, you know what? When I submitted the assignment, I forgot to do this. And I tell them, I says, well, if you get it done before I grade the assignment, and a lot of times I give you a little extra time because I don't end up grading it exactly in that week. I may a day or so. But anyway, the point of the matter is, if you get a attempt number 2 in there, then I will grade both of them. But there are students who want to know, after I submitted a grade, they want to know, can you redo the assignment? And my answer is no, because it's unfair. I got 100 and almost 30-something students. if I did that for one, that would open up and be unfair to anybody else. So I'm giving you enough information to do it right the first time. So that's the thing that I stress to all of my students. So with that, I'm going to say good night, and thank you for coming out tonight again, and see you next week.